Welcome back to another Masters in Art project. Today we are going to be working on the barn perspectives, which these are some examples of previously done pieces of work. So I'm going to walk you through how to get your beautiful piece of art done today. The first thing we need to do always is to get out the waxy piece of paper that is in your bag to always protect your surface area. So lay it out so you're ready to go because we're going to be working with oil pastels a little bit later. The next thing you need is your cream colored sheet of paper. It's a watercolor type of paper. So figure out which side's going to be your back and write your name on it. Full name, teacher, J-R-E-S. And go ahead and flip it over and we can get started on our project. The next thing we're going to need to start with is honestly the most of what we're going to do is use the straight edge that came in your baggie, which is a little bit of a tougher piece of paper. If you have a ruler at home and you'd rather use that, and a sharp pencil. So the first thing we're going to work on is what we're going to call a horizon line, and that's going to go about a third of a way down your page horizontally on your paper. So figure out about where a third is and lightly draw your line with your pencil and your straight edge right across. Just like that. That's your horizon line. So that's where the land meets the sky. The next thing we're going to do is put in our vanishing point. And the vanishing point is where everything in the distance, as you can see from our examples, goes to. So we're going to pick our vanishing point, again, about a third of the way over, maybe from the left or right hand side of your page. And it's honestly just a dot at this point. So that's your vanishing point. The next thing we're going to work on is drawing our barn. And to do that, we're going to start with the first and front barn, which is just a square or rectangle, depending on how you want it to look. Just like that. And then we'll do the part of the barn that's behind it, and maybe it's a little bit bigger and it stands back a little bit further. And so I'm going to go ahead and do mine like this. And then we'll want to put the tops of our barn, and maybe mine has a flat roof, just like that. So now we'll want to finish our barns and make it look like we have the whole rest of the barn area. And that is where our vanishing point comes in. So every end of the barn needs to reach that vanishing point. So I'm just going to start down here at the bottom edge of my barn, and I'm going to connect my straight edge from the vanishing point to the bottom part of my front barn and use my straight edge and make a line. And then I'm going to move up to the top side of the barn, same point, same vanishing point, and just follow just like I'm doing to your vanishing point. Eventually you might erase some of these pencil marks, so don't make them too dark. But every point of the barn should reach the vanishing point. And then I'm going to figure out, gosh, where does my barn end? And I'm going to say my barn ends here. So that is where we add in our barn. It's starting to look like a barn. And it looks a little silly with these here, but we'll eventually erase those. So the next thing we'll do is maybe draw some trees in here by our barn. And remember, don't go straight up this way because your trees will be crooked. You want to go straight up this way like a tree grows. So I'm just going to add a little trunk and maybe a bushy leaf here, and a trunk and a bushy leaf here, maybe one more back here. And remember, they go smaller as they go back because they're getting further away. That's the whole part of the horizon. So remember, like I said, these back vanishing lines now can be erased. So grab your eraser and carefully erase everything from the barn back to your vanishing point, and you should be left with what looks like a little barn set. So go ahead and erase to your vanishing point. Pause if you need to. Give yourself some time. My tree goes back a little bit further than my barn, but that's okay. So that is how I left mine. So now you can see I'm left with just a barn. The next thing we're going to do is draw the crop for our farm, like you see in the example. So it doesn't matter how many crops you have. You don't want too many. You don't want it to be too busy. But you do want a few so that we can add some color in and have it be pretty. So I would just start on your horizon line at an angle, one direction this way. I'm going to lightly draw with my straight edge a line. And then maybe I'm going to go a little bit crooked here to the edge of my paper with a line. And then I'm going to turn it a little bit more, make it a little bit broader in the front. And I'm going to do everything from that horizon point. So if I go through the barn, like here, you see how I'm going to go through the barn? Don't draw a line through the barn. Stop at the barn here. Pretend and then start again at the end of your barn. Do you see how I did that? I did not go through the barn. My crop did, but it's an invisible line. And I think I'll add one more crop line over on this far edge. So that is how mine is looking so far. And yours should look pretty close to that. And then if you want, you can maybe add a little stream in to one of your crop lines. Maybe there's a little river, which is just a swervy little swoop. So start at one side and then start at the other and connect it along like that. You don't have to do a river, but it does add a little dimensional color. Do you see where my river is here? And the last thing we're going to do is draw our mountain peaks. And you can see from both of our examples again, everything starts from our horizon line. So I'm going to add sort of a swooping peak up here on that side. And maybe I'll do a little mountain here and then add a little one there. And then as I color, I'll add a little bit more dimension to my mountains. So there's your pencil. And from here, it comes the fun part of coloring our picture in. I've already gotten started here, but I want you to grab your chalk pastels, which should be in a baggie. And there should be a mix of several colors. And start at the top and work down so that you don't get the heel of your hand as chalky. But just start filling in your sky with maybe a blue color, add a gray, you can smear it and color that all in. And then maybe add a little other colors if you want to, and use your finger to add some depth to your sky. And then move down to your mountains and keep your mountains separate from your sky. And do the same thing, maybe a gray or a brown. And then I'm going to use black to outline my mountains and maybe do a little stripes for some depth. And go ahead and do my horizon line. So pause the video here, fill in your sky and your mountains, and then turn your video back on. As you can see, this gets to be a messy adventure, which is fun. So the next thing I'm going to do is try to decide what color I want each of my crop lines, and we're going to do every other color. So I'm going to take a look at what I have for colors here, and I think I'm going to do an orange and a green. And I'm going to start with green. So pick your two colors, start on one side, and start filling it in. And remember, this stuff gets all over. So be careful of not, this is why we have our wax paper, but also be careful just to not smear it with your fingers into maybe another part of your picture. I try to hold my hands above it. And, you know, like I might want to add a little depth of color, and then I use my finger to blend it in. You see how I did that? Then I'm going to go skip one and go to the next one. So go ahead and start drawing with me. Fill in your crop lines. And it should go pretty quickly with the side of your, you see I'm using the side of my chalk. And then I'm going to add a little bit of this depth and use my finger. So if you need to pause your video to fill in every other crop line with this color, or whatever color you've chosen as your first color, pause your video and come back to me. Have you finished your first color of crop lines? If so, let's move on to our second color of crop lines and see how I'm working around our barn. Don't color through your barn. The next color line I think I'm going to use is yellow. So go ahead and start wherever you are in your every other. Get your yellow in there, and it's okay if it bleeds over like mine has. You can see where some of the colors have bled over. It might be a good idea to take a second, wash your hands if your finger's getting too chalky and dirty. But I'm going to stick with this yellow here for a second. Work around my trees. Don't color your barn and your trees. And if it's too bright for you, you can also put other colors in, like I said, and use your finger to make it a different color. And here I'm going to work around my river, because we'll definitely want our water to be blue. So color away with me. Work around your pencil lines. We'll fill those in later with black. So pause the video here if you need. Fill in your secondary color. My crop lines are all filled in, and the final thing I'm going to do down here in this area is color in my river, which I'm going to use a dark blue, and just trace. We've got a kitty helping us today. We're going to trace around the lines of my river and fill that all in. And if you didn't draw a river, no worries. Fill that all in. Remember not to scoot your hand across the paper because it makes a mess. You can see this is why we have the wax paper under it, to save our table or our counter or wherever we might be working. So that's my river. And the last thing I'm going to do is work on my barn. So I'm going to take the dark brown and be very careful about drawing in the roof of my barn, right around the crop lines that we covered. And then we're going to fill it in with the black, which will really highlight our barn. Leave the barn itself white, or we're going to just use the white maybe. Fill that in, and then before I forget where my lines were, I'm going to take the black around the roof area here. Just fill my barn lines in like so. Then I'm going to take, I want a barn door, so I'm going to take my black piece of chalk and just draw on a barn door. And maybe you want to highlight it with a little brown. Maybe it's a wood barn door. And before I do, well, I think I'll do my barn first. So I'm going to color my barn in white, which you probably don't need to do if you don't want, because it's already white, but it does add, you can kind of see it. So make your barn white, work around your trees. And then I'm going to color in my tree bushes here. I'm going to use a different color green. There's my tree bush, and then I'm going to do black trunks on mine so you can see them. And maybe I want to highlight around my trees. And more tree bushes, so fill in all your tree bushes. And take your black or your brown, get your trunks done. And we should be close to having everything pretty filled in. So what I'm going to do to finish this and to kind of complete my barn is each of these lines, maybe I use brown on my crop lines. And do you see how that kind of just makes them separate and finishes them a little bit? Let's go through to your crop lines. You can use black, you can use brown. And my river. And this goes pretty quick if you're kind of with it. You can pause and do this if you want. I'm going to pause and do all the lines around my barn. Here's what I've done. I've traced all of the areas around my barn. I even added a little dusting there. Maybe I have a shadow there. I've outlined all my trees. I put the bottom of my barn. All of my crop lines are filled in. My mountains are filled in. And I'm pretty happy with how bright and cheerful my barn turned out. I hope you had fun doing this project with me. Make sure that you kind of dust your chalk off on your wax paper. You can set that aside. Have a parent drop this off at the school for you so that it can be hung on the wall with the other students. Make sure that all of your chalk gets cleaned up and put back in your baggie for the next project that we use it on. Put your baggie aside. And the next thing I want you to do is, you can see that there's probably chalk on your wax paper. Very carefully tip it like this and walk it to the garbage and slip it into the garbage. And that way it won't get all over your table or your clothes or anything else. And then fold it back up and put it back in your baggie for the next project that we do together. And I will see you then.